Welcome to One Book, One Coffee. Today, we're diving into a book that is not exactly a casual read. But then again, you're not here for the ordinary, are you? You've chosen to explore Hermann Hesse's Steppenwolf, and that says something remarkable about you. In a world full of endless scrolling and binge-worthy shows, you've decided to invest your time in a narrative that is as deep as it is intriguing, a decision that speaks to your desire to learn and grow. Steppenwolf is not just another novel, it's a journey into the complexities of the human psyche. It's a story that masterfully balances the line between reality and fantasy, delving into themes of isolation, self-discovery, and duality. Although not widely cited by contemporary figures like Bill Gates or Oprah, Steppenwolf has left its mark on countless readers and thinkers, standing as a testament to Hesse's insightful exploration of spiritual and existential questions. Now let's talk about the man behind the book. Hermann Hesse was a German-Swiss poet, novelist, and painter, whose own life was a whirlwind of spiritual searching and existential reflection. Hesse wrote Steppenwolf during a period of deep personal crisis, experiencing a profound sense of isolation and a quest for self-understanding. His struggles and introspections led him to create this profound narrative. Now, a quick note before we dive in. This is a detailed chapter-by-chapter walkthrough, so it's going to be a longer session. Take your time with it. There's no rush. If you need to step away, save this video to your watch later or forward the link to yourself on WhatsApp so you can pick up right where you left off. So grab your coffee, settle in, and let's walk through this book together, chapter by chapter, idea by idea. Let's begin. Unraveling the Mysteries of the Soul. Hermann Hesse, a German-Swiss poet and novelist, wrote Steppenwolf during a personal and existential crisis, reflecting his own struggles with identity, isolation, and spirituality. Picture this. You're sitting in a cozy cafe, steam rising from your coffee cup, and someone slides a mysterious manuscript across the table toward you. That's exactly what Hermann Hesse does to us at the very beginning of Steppenwolf, and honestly, it's one of the most intriguing ways I've ever encountered to start a story. We're not diving straight into the action here. Instead, Hesse introduces us to this tale through the eyes of someone who's essentially saying, "Look, I found these papers, and I have no idea what to make of them, but maybe you will." The preface is narrated by Harry Haller's nephew, though we learn this detail gradually, like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. This young man, probably in his 20s or 30s, represents everything that Harry Haller is not. He's conventional, settled, comfortable with bourgeois life. He has a steady job, probably pays his taxes on time, and genuinely enjoys the simple pleasures of middle-class existence. Now, think about this for a moment. How many times in your own life have you encountered someone who made you question everything about how you're living? Maybe it was a college professor who challenged your assumptions, or a coworker who seemed to operate by completely different rules, or even a stranger you met while traveling who opened your eyes to possibilities you'd never considered. That's exactly what happens here. This nephew rents out a room in his aunt's house to Harry Haller, and what unfolds is a fascinating study in contrasts. Imagine you're subletting a room to someone, expecting a quiet, normal tenant, and instead you get someone who seems to live in an entirely different universe. The nephew describes how Haller would disappear for days, then return looking haggard and tormented. He'd play classical music late into the night, have intense conversations about philosophy and literature, and generally behave in ways that both fascinated and disturbed his conventional landlord's family. What's brilliant about Hesse's approach here is that he's giving us multiple perspectives right from the start. We're not just getting Harry's story directly. We're seeing it filtered through the eyes of someone who represents the very world that Harry feels alienated from. It's like watching a nature documentary where the narrator is a city dweller trying to understand the behavior of some exotic creature. The nephew admits his confusion openly. He says something along the lines of, "I didn't understand him, and I'm not sure I ever will, but something about him stuck with me." This setup creates an immediate tension that mirrors our modern experience perfectly. Think about social media for a second. We're constantly observing people whose lives seem radically different from our own. We see the carefully curated highlights, the moments of apparent freedom or creativity or rebellion, and we wonder what it would be like to live that way. But we also see the costs, the instability, the apparent unhappiness that sometimes lurks beneath the surface. The nephew's relationship with Harry captures this exact dynamic. He's simultaneously attracted to and repelled by Harry's unconventional lifestyle. The nephew describes finding Harry's manuscript after he disappeared, and this discovery becomes the central conceit of the entire novel. It's as if you were cleaning out a former roommate's things and discovered a detailed journal that revealed an entirely different person than the one you thought you knew. The nephew is honest about his limitations as an interpreter of these writings. He essentially says, "I'm giving you these papers as I found them. I can't explain them, but maybe someone else can make sense of what this man was going through." This framing device does something incredibly sophisticated. It makes us, the readers, into detectives and psychologists. We're not just consuming a story, we're analyzing evidence, trying to understand a complex human being through fragments and clues. It's remarkably similar to how we try to understand people in real life. We rarely get the complete picture of anyone. Instead, we piece together impressions, overheard conversations, glimpses into their private moments, and we construct our understanding from these incomplete sources. The nephew also serves as a representative of what we might call normal society. He works, he follows social conventions, he values stability and respectability. But Harry Haller represents something else entirely, something that both attracts and frightens conventional people. Now, consider your own social circle for a moment. Don't you know people who fit into these categories? The ones who seem to have it all figured out, who follow the expected path, who find genuine satisfaction in traditional markers of success. And then there are the others, the ones who seem to be searching for something deeper, who question everything, who can't seem to find their place in conventional society. What makes this preface so compelling is that the nephew doesn't judge Harry harshly, even though Harry's lifestyle is completely foreign to him. There's a genuine curiosity there, a recognition that Harry possessed something valuable, even if it came at a tremendous personal cost. The nephew describes moments when Harry seemed almost luminous with intelligence and insight, times when his conversations revealed depths of understanding that were both inspiring and overwhelming. This dynamic reflects something we see constantly in contemporary culture. Think about how we view artists, writers, musicians, or other creative types who live outside conventional boundaries. We're often simultaneously fascinated and concerned. We admire their apparent freedom and authenticity, but we also worry about their stability and happiness. The nephew's perspective captures this ambivalence perfectly. As the preface concludes, we're left with a sense of anticipation and mystery. The nephew is essentially handing us a puzzle and saying, "Here, you try to figure this out." It's an invitation to dive deeper into the human psyche, to explore questions about meaning, authenticity, and the cost of living an examined life. The manuscript becomes a kind of archaeological artifact, a record of one man's intense struggle with existence itself. This framing sets up the entire novel as an exploration rather than a simple narrative. We're not just going to follow Harry's story. We're going to try to understand what drove him to live the way he did, what he was searching for, and whether his ultimate insights justify the pain he endured. The nephew's honest bewilderment becomes our starting point, and from here, we'll dive into Harry's own words, his own attempt to explain the unexplainable nature of his existence as someone caught between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. Picture this. You're sitting alone in your apartment on a rainy Tuesday evening, scrolling through social media, watching everyone else's highlight reels while you're stuck in your own mundane reality. You feel like you're living two completely different lives, the one you show the world, and the one that's screaming inside your head. Well, my friend, grab that coffee a little tighter, because Hermann Hesse understood this feeling over a century ago, and what he captured in Harry Haller's records is so painfully relevant to our modern existence that it might just give you chills. When we first encounter Harry Haller's personal writings in Steppenwolf, we're not reading the polished thoughts of a philosopher or the careful observations of a scholar. No, we're diving headfirst into the raw, unfiltered consciousness of a man who feels fundamentally split in two. Harry describes himself as part human, part wolf, the Steppenwolf, and this isn't just some poetic metaphor he's throwing around. This is his lived reality, his daily torment, his way of making sense of why he feels so utterly alien in a world that seems designed for everyone but him. Now think about this for a moment. How many times have you felt like you're wearing a mask? You're at work, smiling and making small talk, playing the role of the productive, well-adjusted member of society. But underneath, there's this other part of you, maybe it's angry, maybe it's wild, maybe it's just desperately lonely, that feels completely disconnected from the performance you're putting on. Harry Haller lives in this tension every single day, and Hesse gives us an unflinchingly honest look at what that does to a person's soul. Harry's records begin with what might be the most brutally honest self-assessment you'll ever encounter in literature. He doesn't sugarcoat his condition or try to make himself sympathetic. Instead, he lays out his reality with surgical precision. He is a man caught between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. The human side of him craves connection, culture, intellectual stimulation, and meaning. The wolf side is primal, instinctual, rejecting society's artificial constraints and hungry for something more authentic than the bourgeois life that surrounds him. But here's where it gets really interesting, and where Hesse shows his genius. Harry isn't just complaining about his situation, he's conducting a kind of psychological archaeology on himself. He digs into why he feels this way, and what he discovers is that his split isn't unique to him. It's the human condition, amplified and made conscious. Most people, Harry realizes, live with these same contradictions, but they've learned to suppress one side or the other, or they've simply never become aware of the tension at all. Think about our current moment. We're living in an age where we're constantly told to optimize ourselves, to find our passion, to live our best life. Yet so many of us feel more disconnected than ever. We have more ways to connect with others than any generation in human history, yet loneliness is at epidemic levels. We have access to infinite information and entertainment, yet we're restless and unsatisfied. Harry Haller's records speak directly to this modern predicament, because he's grappling with the same fundamental question. How do you live authentically in a world that seems to reward conformity and superficiality? Harry's reflections take us through his daily existence, and what emerges is a portrait of someone who has become exquisitely sensitive to the artificial nature of modern life. He can't stand the small talk, the social rituals, the way people seem content with lives that feel, to him, like elaborate forms of sleepwalking. When he walks through the streets of his city, he sees people going through the motions of living without really being alive. It's like he's developed a kind of spiritual allergic reaction to inauthenticity. But here's what makes Harry's records so powerful, and so different from simple misanthropy. He doesn't just reject society and retreat into isolation. Well, he does retreat, but he's tormented by his retreat. He recognizes that his wolf nature, his rejection of social norms, is just as much a prison as blind conformity would be. He's caught in what we might today call analysis paralysis, but on an existential level. He sees too clearly, understands too much, and this clarity becomes its own form of suffering. Now you might be thinking, this sounds incredibly depressing. Why would I want to read about someone who's so miserable? But here's the thing, Harry's unflinching self-examination is actually the beginning of wisdom. He's doing something that most of us avoid. He's looking directly at the contradictions within himself without trying to resolve them too quickly or explain them away. He's sitting with discomfort, and in that sitting, he's beginning to understand something profound about the nature of human existence. One of the most striking aspects of Harry's records is how he describes his relationship with culture and art. He's deeply educated, loves classical music, reads voraciously, and yet he feels like these things have become hollow for him. It's not that he's lost his appreciation for beauty or meaning. It's that he can no longer use culture as a way to avoid confronting the deeper questions of existence. The music, the books, the art that once provided solace now seem like beautiful decorations on a fundamentally empty structure. This hits particularly hard in our current age of content consumption. We have Netflix, Spotify, social media, podcasts, books, games, infinite ways to fill our time and distract ourselves. But how often do we use these things as genuine nourishment for our souls versus just sophisticated forms of avoidance? Harry's records force us to ask, what are we really seeking when we consume culture, and are we finding it? As Harry continues his self-examination, he begins to articulate something that feels revolutionary. The idea that maybe the split he feels, the tension between his human and wolf nature, isn't a problem to be solved but a reality to be embraced. Maybe the goal isn't to choose one side or the other, but to find a way to honor both parts of himself. This is where Hesse begins to lay the groundwork for the transformation that will come later in the novel. The beauty of Harry Haller's records is that they don't offer easy answers or quick fixes. Instead, they offer something much more valuable: the courage to look honestly at our own contradictions, and the wisdom to understand that this looking itself is the beginning of genuine change. In a world that constantly promises us solutions and optimizations, Harry's journey reminds us that sometimes the most profound growth comes from learning to live with questions rather than rushing toward answers. As we prepare to follow Harry deeper into his strange and transformative journey, his initial records serve as both warning and invitation. A warning about the costs of living unconsciously, and an invitation to embrace the full complexity of what it means to be human in all its messy, contradictory, beautiful difficulty. Welcome back to One Book, One Coffee, where we dive deep into the stories that shape our understanding of what it means to be human. I hope you've got your favorite mug in hand, because today we're venturing into one of the most psychologically complex territories Hermann Hesse ever mapped out for us. We're exploring the very heart of Steppenwolf, that fascinating and deeply unsettling concept of Harry Haller's dual nature, the man who sees himself split between civilization and wildness, between the human and the wolf. Picture this for a moment. You're sitting in your living room, maybe scrolling through your phone after a long day at work, and suddenly you catch a glimpse of yourself in a dark window. For just an instant, you don't recognize the person staring back at you. There's something almost feral in those eyes, something that doesn't quite match the civilized mask you've been wearing all day. That split second of disconnection, that moment when you wonder who you really are beneath all the social conditioning and expectations, that's exactly where Harry Haller lives every single day of his existence. Hesse introduces us to this concept of the Steppenwolf not as some mystical transformation, but as a brutally honest examination of the human psyche. Harry sees himself as fundamentally divided, torn between two irreconcilable natures. On one side, there's the man, the cultured intellectual who appreciates Mozart and Goethe, who understands the finer points of philosophy and art, who can navigate dinner parties and engage in sophisticated conversation. On the other side lurks the wolf, the creature of instinct and desire, the part of him that wants to howl at the moon, to tear apart the hypocrisies of bourgeois society, to live according to raw, unfiltered impulse rather than carefully constructed social rules. Now, think about this for a moment. How often do you feel this same tension in your own life? Maybe you're sitting in a board meeting, nodding politely while someone drones on about quarterly projections, and part of you wants to stand up and scream that none of this matters, that we're all just playing elaborate games while real life passes us by. Or perhaps you're at a family gathering, smiling and making small talk, while inside you're fighting the urge to tell everyone exactly what you think about their choices, their pretensions, their comfortable delusions. That's your inner wolf, scratching at the door of your carefully constructed persona. What makes Hesse's exploration so powerful is that he doesn't present this duality as something to be solved or cured. This isn't a self-help book promising to integrate your shadow self through 7 easy steps. Instead, he forces us to sit with the uncomfortable truth that maybe this division isn't a problem to be fixed, but simply the human condition laid bare. Harry's suffering comes not from having these two natures, but from his belief that he can only be one or the other, that he must choose between being civilized or being authentic. The wolf in Harry represents everything that modern society tells us to suppress. It's the part of us that wants immediate gratification, that rejects authority simply because it exists, that sees through the elaborate charades we perform to maintain social order. When Harry looks at the comfortable middle-class world around him, with its predictable routines and unexamined assumptions, the wolf in him wants to tear it all down. Not out of malice, but out of a desperate hunger for something real, something that acknowledges the wildness that still lives in human hearts despite centuries of domestication. But here's where it gets really interesting. The man in Harry isn't just some weak, corrupted version of his true self. The human side represents something equally valuable, the capacity for beauty, for connection, for the kind of transcendent experiences that only consciousness can provide. When Harry listens to Mozart, when he reads poetry, when he experiences those moments of aesthetic rapture that lift him out of his daily misery, that's the human side accessing something the wolf could never reach alone. Think about the technology we carry in our pockets today. Your smartphone is simultaneously a miracle of human ingenuity and a leash that keeps you tethered to a system of constant surveillance and manipulation. The human in you marvels at the ability to video chat with someone on the other side of the planet, while the wolf in you wants to smash the thing against the wall and run naked through the forest. Both responses are valid. Both contain truth about what this technology means for our humanity. Hesse understood something that we're still grappling with today, that the price of civilization might be the systematic suppression of our authentic selves. But he also recognized that complete surrender to our wolf nature would mean abandoning everything that makes consciousness precious. Harry's tragedy isn't that he contains multitudes, it's that he believes these multitudes must be at war with each other. Consider how this plays out in our current moment. We live in an age of unprecedented comfort and convenience, yet rates of depression and anxiety continue to climb. We have access to more information, more entertainment, more connection than any generation in human history, yet so many people report feeling empty, disconnected, like they're living someone else's life. That's the wolf in us, starving for authenticity in a world that rewards performance over truth. The genius of Hesse's insight is that he doesn't offer easy answers. He doesn't suggest that Harry should embrace his wolf nature and abandon civilization, nor does he recommend complete submission to social expectations. Instead, he presents the tension itself as the space where real growth might be possible. The Steppenwolf isn't a problem to be solved. It's a condition to be explored, understood, and ultimately transcended, not through choosing one side or the other, but through finding a way to honor both. This speaks directly to anyone who's ever felt like they're living a double life, anyone who's experienced the exhaustion of maintaining a public persona while privately struggling with doubts, desires, and dreams that don't fit the acceptable narrative. The Steppenwolf lives in the gap between who we think we should be and who we actually are, between our aspirations and our appetites, between our need for belonging and our hunger for freedom. As we move deeper into Harry's journey, we'll see how this fundamental division plays out in his relationships, his choices, and his ultimate confrontation with the possibility of transformation. But for now, let that wolf howl a little in your chest. Feel the tension between your civilized self and your wild self, not as something to be ashamed of, but as the very thing that makes you magnificently, problematically, beautifully human. Stay with us as we continue exploring the labyrinth of Harry Haller's psyche, where every turn reveals new depths of what it means to be caught between worlds, and perhaps what it might mean to finally stop choosing sides in the war within ourselves. Picture yourself walking through your neighborhood on one of those gray, ordinary days when everything feels predictable and suffocating. You're going through the motions, feeling disconnected from the world around you, when suddenly someone hands you a mysterious flyer that promises something extraordinary. This is exactly what happens to Harry Haller in one of the most pivotal moments of Steppenwolf, and it's a scene that speaks directly to anyone who's ever felt trapped in the mundane routines of modern life. Harry receives this strange leaflet about something called the Magic Theater, and let me tell you, this isn't your typical community theater advertisement. The paper itself seems almost alive in his hands, shimmering with possibility. The words on it are cryptic, promising entrance to a world where reality bends and the impossible becomes possible. But here's the catch, and it's written right there in bold letters. For madmen only. Price of admission, your mind. Now, think about this for a moment. How often do we receive invitations in our own lives that ask us to pay such a steep price? Maybe it's not a mysterious theater, but perhaps it's an opportunity to travel somewhere completely unknown, to start a new career that terrifies and excites us in equal measure, or to open our hearts to love when we've been hurt before. The Magic Theater represents those moments when life offers us a chance to break free from our self-imposed limitations, but only if we're willing to surrender our comfortable certainties. What makes this invitation so powerful is that it arrives at precisely the moment when Harry needs it most. He's been wandering through his existence like a ghost, neither fully alive nor completely dead, caught between his intellectual, civilized side and his wild, instinctual nature. The leaflet appears as if summoned by his deepest longing for transformation. Have you ever noticed how the universe seems to present us with exactly what we need, often disguised as something we're not sure we want? The Magic Theater itself is a brilliant metaphor for the therapeutic process, for deep self-exploration, for any journey that requires us to confront the multiple selves living within us. Think about it in terms of modern psychology. We now understand that personality isn't fixed, that we contain multitudes, that the self is far more fluid and complex than we once believed. The Magic Theater is essentially an early exploration of what we might now call parts work or internal family systems therapy, where we learn to recognize and integrate all the different aspects of our personality. But Hesse takes this concept even further. The theater promises to show Harry not just who he is, but who he could become. It's like having access to a cosmic costume shop where you can try on different versions of yourself. Imagine if you could step into a space where you could explore your unlived lives, where you could see what would have happened if you'd made different choices, taken different risks, followed different dreams. The price of admission, your mind, isn't really about losing your sanity. It's about surrendering your rigid ideas about who you think you are and what you think is possible. In our everyday lives, we build these elaborate mental prisons for ourselves. We tell ourselves stories about our limitations, about what people like us can and cannot do. The Magic Theater demands that we hand over these limiting beliefs at the door. Consider how this applies to our modern world. We're constantly bombarded with messages telling us to find our authentic self, as if there's one true version of us waiting to be discovered. But what if authenticity isn't about finding a single, fixed identity? What if it's about embracing the full spectrum of our possibilities? The Magic Theater suggests that we're not meant to be just one thing, that the richest life comes from exploring all our potential selves. The leaflet also represents the way meaningful change often comes to us. It's rarely convenient or comfortable. Harry doesn't receive this invitation when he's feeling confident and ready for adventure. It comes to him in his darkest hour, when he's contemplating ending his life. This is how transformation works in the real world too. The opportunities that truly change us often arrive when we feel least prepared for them, when we're at our most vulnerable. Think about the people in your life who have undergone profound transformations. Maybe it's someone who left a stable but soul-crushing job to pursue their passion, or someone who moved to a foreign country without speaking the language, or someone who ended a long relationship to discover who they were outside of that partnership. These decisions often look crazy from the outside, and they certainly felt crazy to the people making them. But sometimes, a little madness is exactly what we need to break free from lives that have become too small for us. The Magic Theater also speaks to our relationship with reality itself. In our hyperconnected, always-on world, we often feel trapped by the consensus reality around us. We scroll through social media and see everyone else's highlight reels. We follow news cycles that keep us in a state of perpetual anxiety. We measure our worth by external metrics that may have nothing to do with our actual happiness or fulfillment. The Magic Theater offers an escape from all of this, a chance to step outside the agreed-upon version of reality and explore what else might be possible. But here's what's truly beautiful about this scene. The invitation doesn't promise Harry an easy path or a quick fix. It doesn't claim it will solve all his problems or make him eternally happy. Instead, it offers him something far more valuable, the chance to fully experience his own complexity, to stop running from the contradictions within himself and start dancing with them instead. As we move deeper into Harry's journey, this mysterious invitation becomes the doorway to everything that follows. It represents that crucial moment when we stop being passive victims of our circumstances and become active participants in our own transformation. The Magic Theater isn't just a place Harry will visit. It's a way of being in the world, a commitment to embracing the full spectrum of human experience rather than settling for a diminished version of life. The next time life hands you your own mysterious leaflet, your own invitation to step beyond the familiar, remember Harry standing there with that shimmering paper in his hands, faced with a choice that would change everything. So we've been following Harry Haller through his dark night of the soul, watching this man of letters wrestle with his divided nature, and now something extraordinary happens. Picture this. You're at your absolute lowest point. Maybe you've just been through a breakup, lost a job, or you're simply drowning in that peculiar kind of modern despair that comes from feeling disconnected from everything around you. And then, out of nowhere, someone walks into your life who sees right through you, challenges everything you think you know about yourself, and somehow makes you feel more alive than you have in years. That's exactly what happens when Harry meets Hermine. Now think about this for a moment. How often do we encounter someone who truly sees us? Not the polished version we present to the world, not the professional persona or the social media highlight reel, but the raw, contradictory, messy human being underneath it all. Hermine is that rare person who possesses what we might call emotional X-ray vision. She looks at Harry, this middle-aged intellectual drowning in his own sophistication and self-loathing, and she doesn't see a hopeless case. She sees potential. Their meeting isn't some romantic fairy tale encounter. Harry finds himself in a tavern, probably nursing his wounds with alcohol, when this woman approaches him with an almost unsettling directness. Imagine meeting someone who immediately starts talking to you as if they've known you for years, who cuts through all the small talk and social niceties and goes straight to the heart of who you are. That's Hermine. She's like that friend who can tell you're upset the moment you walk in the room, even when you're trying to hide it behind a smile. What makes Hermine so compelling isn't just her perceptiveness, but her complete lack of judgment. Here's Harry, convinced he's some kind of monster, this Steppenwolf torn between his civilized nature and his wild instincts, and Hermine essentially says, "So what? We're all contradictory beings." She doesn't try to fix him or change him. Instead, she holds up a mirror that shows him a different way of seeing himself. Think about the people in your own life who have had this kind of transformative effect. Maybe it was a teacher who believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself, or a friend who helped you see your flaws not as fatal character defects, but as interesting facets of your humanity. Hermine represents that archetypal figure we all need at some point, the wise guide who appears just when we're about to give up on ourselves entirely. But here's where Hesse gets really interesting. Hermine doesn't offer Harry some simple self-help solution or positive thinking platitudes. She challenges his entire worldview by suggesting that his problem isn't that he's divided between good and evil, between the civilized and the wild. His problem is that he's trying to live in only one part of himself while rejecting all the others. It's like trying to play a symphony with only half the instruments in the orchestra. Consider how relevant this is to our modern struggle with authenticity. We live in an age where we're constantly told to be yourself. But which self? The professional self, the family self, the creative self, the social media self. We fragment ourselves into different personas for different contexts, and then wonder why we feel so disconnected and inauthentic. Hermine suggests to Harry, and by extension to us, that perhaps the goal isn't to choose oneself over another, but to embrace the full spectrum of who we are. She introduces Harry to a world he's been intellectually aware of but has never truly experienced, the world of sensual pleasure, of dancing, of letting go of rigid control. Now, before you think this is just about hedonism or escapism, consider what's really happening here. Hermine is teaching Harry that wisdom isn't just found in books and philosophical contemplation. It's also found in the body, in movement, in the simple act of being present in the moment, without analyzing it to death. This reminds me of those moments when we're so caught up in our heads, so busy thinking about life that we forget to actually live it. You know that feeling when you're walking through a beautiful place, but you're so busy taking photos for Instagram that you never actually see it with your own eyes. Or when you're so focused on optimizing your life for maximum productivity that you forget to enjoy the process. Hermine represents the antidote to this kind of disconnected living. What's particularly fascinating about their relationship is how Hermine manages to be both teacher and student, guide and fellow traveler. She doesn't position herself as some enlightened guru dispensing wisdom from on high. Instead, she's more like a skilled dance partner who knows how to lead you into movements you didn't know you were capable of. She challenges Harry's assumptions not through argument but through experience, not through criticism but through invitation. The dynamic between them also reflects something profound about how we learn and grow. The most transformative relationships in our lives often aren't the ones where someone tells us what to do, but where someone shows us new possibilities, new ways of being in the world. Hermine doesn't try to cure Harry of his Steppenwolf nature. Instead, she helps him see that maybe being a Steppenwolf isn't a curse to be overcome, but a gift to be understood and integrated. As their relationship develops, we see Harry beginning to question not just his despair, but also his attachment to that despair. Sometimes we become so identified with our suffering that we're afraid to let it go, as if our pain has become our identity. Hermine gently but persistently challenges this, showing Harry that he can acknowledge his darkness without being consumed by it, that he can honor his complexity without being paralyzed by it. This section of Steppenwolf speaks to anyone who's ever felt like they don't quite fit into the neat categories the world wants to place us in. In our age of personal branding and social media personas, Hermine's message feels more relevant than ever. She's essentially saying that our contradictions, our multiplicities, our refusal to be easily categorized, these aren't bugs in our system, they're features. They're what make us fully human. As we move forward in Harry's journey, we'll see how this encounter with Hermine sets the stage for even more profound revelations about the nature of identity, reality, and what it means to truly live rather than simply exist. Her influence on Harry represents that crucial moment we all need, when someone sees our potential even when we can't see it ourselves, and invites us to step into a larger, more complex, and ultimately more authentic version of who we are. As we settle deeper into Harry Haller's journey through the labyrinth of his own soul, we encounter two figures who will fundamentally challenge everything he thinks he knows about living. Picture yourself at that moment when you meet someone who seems to operate by completely different rules than you do, someone whose very existence makes you question whether you've been doing life all wrong. That's exactly what happens when Harry meets Pablo and Maria, two characters who represent something Harry has spent his entire intellectual life dismissing as shallow or meaningless. Pablo enters Harry's world like a warm breeze through a dusty library. He's a musician, a saxophone player who lives entirely in the present moment, and when Harry first encounters him, there's this immediate clash of worldviews that's almost comical. Here's Harry, weighted down by his books and his thoughts and his endless analysis of existence, meeting this young man who seems to glide through life with an almost supernatural lightness. Pablo doesn't read philosophy, he doesn't agonize over the meaning of existence, and he certainly doesn't spend sleepless nights wrestling with the duality of human nature. Instead, he plays music, he enjoys pleasures without guilt, and he treats life like a dance rather than a problem to be solved. Now think about this for a moment. How often do we encounter people like Pablo in our own lives? Maybe it's that friend who never seems stressed about anything, who can find joy in the simplest moments while you're busy planning and worrying and analyzing. Maybe it's someone who posts those carefree vacation photos on social media while you're home reading self-help books, trying to optimize your existence. We often dismiss these people, don't we? We tell ourselves they're superficial, that they don't understand the deeper complexities of life. But Hesse is asking us to consider something radical here. What if they understand something we don't? Pablo represents what we might call the Dionysian approach to life, named after the Greek god of wine and ecstasy. He embodies pure experience, pure sensation, pure being in the moment. When he speaks to Harry, it's not in the complex, tortured language of the intellectual, but in simple, direct terms about pleasure, about music, about the immediate reality of being alive. He doesn't need to understand life, he simply lives it. And there's something both infuriating and deeply attractive about this to Harry, because part of him recognizes that all his thinking, all his analysis, all his careful examination of existence has brought him to the brink of suicide. Maria, on the other hand, represents a different kind of wisdom, though equally foreign to Harry's intellectual world. She's sensual, earthy, completely comfortable with her body and her desires. In our modern context, we might think of her as someone who's fully embodied, someone who hasn't been taught to be ashamed of her physical nature or to see the body as somehow separate from or inferior to the mind. She moves through the world with a natural grace that comes from accepting herself completely, without the layers of self-judgment and analysis that plague Harry. What's fascinating about Maria is how she challenges Harry's deeply ingrained belief that physical pleasure is somehow base or unworthy. Think about how many of us have inherited this same split, this idea that we're somehow more virtuous if we deny ourselves pleasure, if we focus only on intellectual or spiritual pursuits while treating our bodies like inconvenient vehicles we're stuck with. Maria doesn't see this division at all. For her, sensual pleasure isn't the opposite of wisdom, it's a form of wisdom, a way of connecting with life directly rather than through the filter of thought. When Harry interacts with both Pablo and Maria, he's forced to confront something uncomfortable. The possibility that his intellectual approach to life, while sophisticated and admirable in many ways, has cut him off from essential aspects of being human. It's like he's been trying to understand water by reading about it rather than jumping in and getting wet. Pablo and Maria don't think about life, they participate in it fully, and their very existence challenges Harry's assumption that thinking about life is more valuable than living it. This creates a profound tension that many of us can relate to in our modern world. We live in a time where we're constantly encouraged to optimize, to analyze, to understand ourselves through apps and metrics and self-improvement strategies. We read about mindfulness instead of simply being present. We analyze our relationships instead of just loving. We study happiness instead of allowing ourselves to feel joy. Pablo and Maria represent the radical alternative. What if we stopped trying to figure everything out and simply allowed ourselves to experience what's right in front of us. But Hesse isn't presenting this as a simple either-or choice. He's not saying that Harry should abandon his intellectual nature and become like Pablo or Maria. Instead, he's suggesting something more nuanced and challenging, that perhaps the path forward involves integration rather than rejection. Maybe Harry needs to learn from Pablo's spontaneity without losing his capacity for deep thought. Maybe he needs to embrace Maria's embodied wisdom without abandoning his intellectual gifts. This is where the story becomes particularly relevant to our contemporary struggles with work-life balance, with the tension between achievement and fulfillment, between thinking and feeling. How many of us feel like Harry, caught between our desire to understand life and our need to actually live it? How many of us have become so good at analyzing our experiences that we've forgotten how to simply have them? The beauty of Pablo and Maria as characters is that they don't lecture Harry about his approach to life. They simply embody an alternative, and their very existence becomes a kind of teaching. Pablo plays his saxophone not to make a philosophical point about music, but because music brings him joy. Maria embraces pleasure not to prove a point about the body, but because pleasure feels good. They're not trying to convert Harry to their way of being. They're simply living their truth, and in doing so, they create space for Harry to question his own assumptions. As we move forward in Harry's journey, these encounters with Pablo and Maria will prove to be catalytic. They represent the beginning of Harry's recognition that his intellectual approach to life, while valuable, is incomplete. They embody possibilities he's never seriously considered, ways of being that don't require the constant mental gymnastics that have exhausted him. In meeting them, Harry begins to glimpse what it might mean to live from a place of wholeness rather than division, integration rather than internal warfare. And perhaps that's the invitation Hesse is extending to all of us, to consider what we might learn from the Pablos and Marias in our own lives, those people who seem to have found a way to dance with existence rather than wrestling it to the ground. Picture this. You're sitting in your favorite coffee shop, the one where the barista knows your order by heart, and your friend leans across the table with that look in their eyes that says they're about to tell you something that completely changed their perspective on life. That's exactly what happens to Harry Haller in one of the most extraordinary nights in all of literature, during what Hesse calls the masked ball sequence in Steppenwolf. Now, before we dive into this transformative evening, let me set the stage for you. Harry has been living like a ghost in his own life, convinced he's split between his civilized, intellectual side and his wild, animal nature. He's been carrying around this heavy story about himself, this narrative that he's fundamentally broken, fundamentally alone. Sound familiar? We've all been there, haven't we? That moment when you look in the mirror and think, I'm just not cut out for this world, I don't fit anywhere. But here's where Hesse does something absolutely brilliant. He takes Harry to a masked ball, and think about this for a moment. What is a masked ball really? It's a place where you get to try on different versions of yourself, where the normal rules of identity get suspended. In our modern world, we might think of this like those moments when you're traveling alone in a foreign city, or when you join an online community where nobody knows your history, or even when you're at a costume party, and suddenly you're acting completely different than usual. The mask becomes permission to explore parts of yourself you've kept hidden. At this ball, Harry encounters Hermine again, but she's not just Hermine anymore. She's transformed, radiant, moving through the crowd like she owns the very air around her. And here's what's fascinating. She doesn't just look different, she becomes different. Hesse is showing us something profound about human nature. We're not fixed entities. We're not stuck with one version of ourselves forever. Hermann demonstrates what psychologists today call psychological flexibility, the ability to adapt and change based on context and choice. Now think about this. How often do you feel trapped by the story you tell about yourself? I'm not a social person. I'm not creative. I'm not the type who takes risks. Harry has been telling himself he's a lone wolf, a Steppenwolf, forever on the outside looking in. But at this ball something remarkable happens. He begins to dance, not metaphorically, literally. He moves his body to music, connects with other human beings, laughs, flirts, experiences joy. There's this incredible moment where Harry realizes he's been living like he's already dead, going through the motions of existence without actually participating in life. It reminds me of that quote by Anais Nin, and the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. That's exactly what's happening to Harry at this ball. The risk of staying locked in his old identity becomes more unbearable than the risk of transformation. But Hesse doesn't make this transformation easy or simple. This isn't some feel-good story where Harry just decides to be happy and everything works out. The ball is chaotic, overwhelming, sometimes frightening. Harry experiences moments of pure ecstasy followed by confusion and fear. He's like someone learning to swim. There are moments of grace where he's floating effortlessly, and moments where he's sure he's going to drown. What's so modern about this experience is how it mirrors our relationship with social media and digital identity. We curate different versions of ourselves for different platforms, different audiences. We put on masks constantly, the professional mask for LinkedIn, the fun mask for Instagram, the intellectual mask for Twitter. Harry's masked ball is really about discovering that all these different selves can coexist, that we don't have to choose just one identity and stick with it forever. The ball also becomes a laboratory for exploring desire and connection. Harry, who has been living like a monk, suddenly finds himself attracted to multiple people, experiencing the full spectrum of human sensuality. Hesse isn't being gratuitous here. He's exploring how repression of our natural desires can lead to a kind of spiritual death. In our current culture, where we're often told to optimize ourselves, to be productive, to always be improving, we sometimes forget that pleasure and spontaneity and even a little chaos are essential nutrients for the soul. There's a moment during the ball where Harry looks around and sees all these people living fully, expressing themselves authentically, taking risks, making connections, and he realizes he's been observing life instead of living it. How many of us do this? We become spectators of our own existence, watching other people on social media living what seem like fuller, richer lives while we sit on the sidelines critiquing and analyzing instead of participating. The masked ball sequence also introduces us to what Hesse calls the magic theater. This idea that reality is far more fluid and playful than we usually imagine. At the ball, normal social conventions break down. People reveal hidden aspects of themselves. Conversations happen that would never occur in daylight. It's like those perfect late-night conversations you sometimes have with strangers that feel more real than most of your daily interactions. What makes this transformation so powerful is that it's not permanent. Harry doesn't suddenly become a party animal and abandon his intellectual side. Instead, he discovers that he contains multitudes, that he can be both the serious thinker and the sensual dancer, both the loner and the social being. This is what psychologists call integration, not choosing one side of yourself over another, but finding ways to honor all aspects of your personality. As the night progresses and we move toward the end of this extraordinary sequence, Harry realizes that his whole concept of being a Steppenwolf, caught between two natures, was too limiting. He's not just wolf and man. He's infinite possibilities, infinite potential selves waiting to be explored. The masked ball becomes his initiation into a larger understanding of what it means to be human. This sets us up perfectly for what comes next in Harry's journey, the magic theater, where Hesse will take these insights about multiple selves and push them even further into the realm of the surreal and transformative. But that's a story for our next conversation, when we'll explore how Harry learns to play the game of life with the cosmic humor it deserves. So picture this. You're sitting across from me with your favorite cup of coffee, and I've just told you about Harry Haller's wild night at the Masquerade Ball, where he met the enigmatic Hermine and discovered parts of himself he never knew existed. Well, my friend, buckle up, because we're about to dive into the most mind-bending part of Hesse's masterpiece, the Magic Theater. Think of it as the ultimate psychological funhouse, where Harry finally gets to explore all those hidden corners of his soul that he's been running from his entire life. Now, imagine walking into a theater where the curtains don't just rise on a stage, but on your own consciousness. That's exactly what happens when Harry encounters Pablo's mysterious magic theater, with its tantalizing promise written above the entrance. For madmen only, price of admission, your mind. It's like being offered the ultimate virtual reality experience, except instead of exploring alien worlds, you're exploring the alien landscape of your own psyche. Have you ever wondered what would happen if you could literally step inside your own mind and walk around? What rooms would you find? What doors would you be afraid to open? The Magic Theater isn't just some trippy dream sequence that Hesse threw in for shock value. It's the culmination of everything Harry has been struggling with throughout the entire novel. Remember how he's been torn between his intellectual, refined side and his wild, sensual nature? Well, the Magic Theater is where these different aspects of himself finally get to play out their dramas on separate stages. It's like having multiple Netflix shows running simultaneously, except each show stars a different version of you. Think about this for a moment. In our modern world, we're constantly fragmenting ourselves across different platforms and personas. There's your LinkedIn professional self, your Instagram lifestyle self, your family self, your late-night scrolling through philosophical content self. Harry's experience in the Magic Theater is remarkably similar to this digital age phenomenon, except instead of switching between apps, he's literally walking through doors into different versions of his life. Each room represents a different possibility, a different path he could have taken, a different aspect of his personality given free rein. One of the most powerful rooms Harry enters is where he gets to experience himself as a successful lover and socialite, essentially the opposite of his isolated, intellectual existence. Here's where Hesse shows us something profound about human nature. We're not just one thing. That quiet, bookish person you know might have a secret wild child inside, just waiting for permission to dance. That party animal might harbor deep philosophical thoughts they're afraid to share. Harry discovers that his supposed dual nature is actually a multiplicity. He's not just split in two, he's fractured into countless possibilities. But here's where it gets really interesting, and where Hesse anticipates something we're grappling with today more than ever. In another room, Harry encounters a scenario about war and violence, where he's both perpetrator and victim. This isn't Hesse being gratuitously dark. He's exploring how we all contain the capacity for both creation and destruction. Think about how we navigate this in our current world. We can simultaneously love humanity while feeling rage at individual humans, support peace while enjoying violent entertainment, advocate for kindness while harboring cruel thoughts. The Magic Theater forces Harry to confront these contradictions instead of pretending they don't exist. Now you might be wondering, what's the practical wisdom here? How does Harry's psychedelic journey through his own mind help us with our Monday morning problems? Well, consider this. How often do we reject parts of ourselves because they don't fit our self-image? Maybe you think of yourself as a serious person, so you suppress your playful side. Maybe you pride yourself on being rational, so you ignore your intuitive wisdom. The Magic Theater suggests that true self-acceptance means embracing all these different aspects, not trying to eliminate the ones that make us uncomfortable. There's a particularly striking scene where Harry meets different versions of himself at various ages. The idealistic young man, the bitter middle-aged intellectual, the wise elder he might become. It's like scrolling through old photos on your phone and realizing that each version of yourself was real and valid, even if they seem like completely different people now. How often do we judge our past selves harshly or worry obsessively about who we'll become? Harry's experience suggests that all these versions can coexist peacefully once we stop trying to force them into a single, coherent narrative. The genius of the Magic Theater is that it operates on dream logic, where impossible things become possible and contradictions resolve into deeper truths. Harry can be multiple people simultaneously, experience different timelines, and explore relationships that never were but could have been. This mirrors something we all experience in our inner lives, those moments when we daydream about alternate versions of our lives, or when we feel like we're living multiple stories at once. The difference is that Harry gets to actually walk through these possibilities instead of just imagining them. But here's the crucial insight that Hesse offers through this surreal experience. The goal isn't to choose one version of yourself and eliminate the others. It's to learn to orchestrate all these different aspects like a conductor leading a symphony. Each instrument, your logical mind, your emotional heart, your creative spirit, your shadow impulses, has its place in the composition of your life. The Magic Theater teaches Harry and us that the key to wholeness isn't simplification but integration. As Harry moves through the various rooms and experiences, he begins to understand something profound about the nature of personality itself. We're not fixed entities but fluid possibilities, constantly capable of transformation and growth. This is incredibly relevant in our age of personal development and self-improvement culture. Instead of trying to fix ourselves or become someone else entirely, maybe the real work is learning to dance with all the different aspects of who we are. The Magic Theater ultimately serves as both a revelation and a challenge. It reveals the infinite possibilities contained within each human soul, but it also challenges us to take responsibility for all of these aspects, not just the ones we're proud of. As we prepare to see how Harry emerges from this psychological labyrinth, we're left with a question that echoes through our own lives. If you could walk through the rooms of your own Magic Theater, which doors would you open first, and which ones would you be afraid to even approach? The answer might just hold the key to understanding not only Harry's journey, but your own path toward becoming fully, authentically human. Picture this. You're sitting across from someone at a chessboard, but instead of wooden pieces, every square holds a different version of yourself. The shy you, the confident you, the angry you, the compassionate you. Now imagine being told that you've been playing this game all wrong, moving only one or two pieces when you could be conducting an entire symphony of selves. This is exactly what happens to Harry Haller in one of the most mind-bending scenes in Steppenwolf. And honestly, it's a moment that'll make you rethink everything you thought you knew about who you are. We've been following Harry through his journey of self-discovery, watching him grapple with what he calls his dual nature, this constant battle between his human side and his wolf side. But just when we think we understand the framework Hesse has set up, along comes this chess player encounter that completely shatters everything we thought we knew. It's like thinking you're playing checkers only to discover you've been sitting at a chess table this whole time, and someone just explained how the knights move. The chess player appears almost like a wise sage, and there's something beautifully ironic about using chess as the metaphor here. Think about it for a moment. Chess is often seen as this rigid, logical game with clear rules and defined pieces. Each piece has its role, its limitations, its prescribed movements. But what if I told you that's exactly the trap most of us fall into when we think about ourselves? We assign ourselves roles, draw boundaries around our personalities, and then spend our lives moving within those self-imposed limitations. Now here's where it gets fascinating. The chess player essentially tells Harry that his whole concept of being divided into just two parts, the man and the wolf, is laughably simplistic. Imagine thinking you're a coin with only two sides when you're actually a multifaceted diamond with countless surfaces catching light in different ways. The chess player reveals that Harry, like all of us, contains not just two souls, but hundreds, maybe thousands of different aspects, personalities, and potentials. Let me paint you a picture of what this looks like in real life. Think about yourself on a typical Monday morning when you're rushing to work, focused and determined. Now compare that to yourself on a lazy Sunday afternoon, reading a book in a coffee shop. Are you the same person? What about the version of you that emerges when you're comforting a friend in crisis versus the you that comes out during a heated political discussion. Each situation calls forth different aspects of your personality, different skills, different emotional responses. You're not just one static character, you're an entire cast of players. The chess metaphor becomes even more powerful when we consider how most people play the game of life. We tend to develop maybe 2 or 3 strong pieces, our dominant personality traits, and we move those same pieces over and over again. The ambitious professional, the caring parent, the loyal friend. These become our go-to moves, our comfortable patterns. But what about all those other pieces sitting unused on the board? What about the artist in you, the rebel, the mystic, the comedian, the leader, the follower, the dreamer, the pragmatist? Here's something that'll make you pause and think. How many versions of yourself have you never even met? How many potential responses to life's situations have you never explored because you've convinced yourself they're not part of your character? The chess player is essentially showing Harry, and through him showing us, that we've been playing life with artificial limitations, moving only our familiar pieces while leaving vast portions of our potential untapped. The beauty of this encounter is that it reframes the entire concept of choice and possibility. When Harry was stuck in his binary thinking, every decision felt like a war between 2 opposing forces. Should I be responsible or should I be free? Should I conform or should I rebel? Should I be rational or should I follow my instincts? These felt like impossible choices because he was trying to pick sides in a game where he didn't have to choose sides at all. But once you understand that you contain multitudes, as Walt Whitman so beautifully put it, the game changes completely. Suddenly, you're not limited to either or thinking. You can be responsible in some areas and free in others. You can conform when it serves you and rebel when it doesn't. You can be rational about your finances and intuitive about your relationships. The chess player is teaching Harry, and us, that we don't have to be consistent in the way we think we do. Now, think about this in terms of modern life. We live in a world that's constantly asking us to define ourselves, to pick our brand, to stay on message. Social media encourages us to curate a consistent image. Career counselors tell us to find our passion, singular. Dating apps ask us to summarize ourselves in a few carefully chosen characteristics. But what if this whole approach is fundamentally flawed? What if the pressure to be consistent and defined is actually preventing us from accessing the full range of our humanity? The chess player scene suggests something radical, that authenticity isn't about finding your one true self, but about learning to play with all the selves you contain. It's about becoming comfortable with your contradictions, your multiplicities, your capacity to be different things in different moments. This doesn't mean being fake or inconsistent in your values. Rather, it means recognizing that you're complex enough to hold multiple truths simultaneously. Consider how this applies to the choices we face every day. When you're trying to decide on a career change, instead of asking, "What kind of person am I?" you might ask, "What kinds of people am I, and which aspects of myself do I want to develop more fully?" When you're navigating a difficult relationship, instead of wondering if you're being true to yourself, you might explore which version of yourself serves this situation best while still honoring your core values. The chess player encounter also touches on something profound about human potential and growth. If we truly contain all these different aspects, then personal development isn't about becoming someone new. It's about learning to access and integrate parts of ourselves we've been neglecting. It's about expanding our repertoire of responses to life's infinite variety of situations. As we move forward with Harry's journey, this chess game metaphor becomes a lens through which we can view everything that follows. Each choice, each encounter, each moment of crisis becomes an opportunity to discover which pieces we want to move, which aspects of ourselves we want to bring into play. The complexity isn't something to be solved or simplified. It's something to be embraced and skillfully navigated. And that, my friends, changes everything about how we approach not just Harry's story, but our own lives as well. So here we are, my friend, settling into what might be the most extraordinary finale in all of literature. Pour yourself that coffee a little stronger, because what Harry Haller discovers in these final pages of Steppenwolf will shake you to your core and maybe, just maybe, change how you see your own fractured self forever. Picture this. Harry has been through the ringer of the magic theater, that impossible realm where Pablo showed him all the different rooms of his soul. He's seen himself as a murderer, as a lover, as a child, as a sage. He's witnessed the complete dismantling of everything he thought he knew about identity. And now, in this climactic moment, something remarkable happens. The cosmic joke reveals itself, and Harry finally gets it. Think about the last time you had one of those moments where everything suddenly clicked. Maybe you'd been struggling with a problem for months, turning it over in your mind like a Rubik's Cube. And then suddenly, while you were brushing your teeth or walking the dog, the answer just appeared. That's exactly what happens to Harry, except the problem he's been wrestling with isn't some work issue or relationship drama. It's the fundamental question of human existence. How do we live with all the contradictions inside ourselves? The Magic Theater has been Pablo's masterpiece of psychological theater, but it's also been a mirror. Every horrifying and beautiful thing Harry witnessed wasn't really happening to some other version of himself. It was happening to him, right now, in this moment of recognition. The businessman Harry, the artist Harry, the lover Harry, the hermit Harry, they're all real, they're all valid, and they're all him. Now, imagine trying to explain this to someone who spent 50 years believing he was just one thing, just the Steppenwolf, the lone wolf prowling the edges of bourgeois society. Here's where Hesse's genius really shines through, and why this book still speaks to us today in our age of social media personas and professional identities. Harry realizes that his whole life, he's been trying to fit himself into a story that was too small. He called himself the Steppenwolf because it felt dramatic, because it gave him an identity he could understand. But what if you're not just the lone wolf? What if you're also the pack, the forest, the moon the wolf howls at, and the silence that follows? Consider how we live today. On LinkedIn, we're the ambitious professional. On Instagram, we're the adventurous traveler or the devoted parent. On Twitter, we might be the witty commentator or the passionate activist. We fragment ourselves across platforms, and then we wonder why we feel disconnected from our own lives. Harry's revelation is that this fragmentation isn't a bug, it's a feature. We're not supposed to be one consistent thing. We're supposed to be a symphony of selves, playing different movements at different times. But here's the kicker, and this is where the story gets really interesting. Harry doesn't just accept this multiplicity and walk away feeling enlightened. No, he makes a crucial mistake that almost costs him everything. In his excitement about understanding the game, he tries to control it. He attempts to put the pieces back together in a way that makes sense to his old, limited understanding. It's like someone who's just learned that music isn't just melody, it's harmony, rhythm, dynamics, silence, but then tries to conduct a symphony by controlling every single note instead of letting the music flow. Think about this for a moment. How often do we do exactly the same thing? We have a breakthrough, we see a new possibility, and then immediately our controlling mind jumps in and tries to systematize it, optimize it, make it fit into our existing framework. Harry does this with Hermann and Pablo, trying to force his new understanding into old patterns of possession and jealousy. It's like trying to pour an ocean into a coffee cup. The cosmic laughter that erupts at this moment isn't mocking Harry, it's inviting him into a different way of being. Pablo and Mozart, who appear as guides in this surreal finale, aren't laughing at Harry's confusion. They're laughing with the universe at the beautiful absurdity of human existence. Mozart, that eternal child genius, shows Harry that the secret isn't to take yourself so seriously. The secret is to play. Now, this is where the story becomes deeply practical for our modern lives. We live in a culture obsessed with authenticity, with finding our true self, and living in alignment with our values. But what if that whole framework is the problem? What if instead of trying to discover who we really are, we need to learn how to play with who we might become in any given moment? Pablo's final lesson to Harry is devastatingly simple. Learn to laugh. Not the bitter laughter of cynicism, not the nervous laughter of anxiety, but the deep, cosmic laughter of someone who sees the game for what it is and chooses to play it with joy rather than grim determination. It's the laughter of a parent watching their child try to be serious while wearing a superhero costume. It's the laughter of recognition. Oh, we're all just making this up as we go along, aren't we? The resolution isn't that Harry becomes whole or healed or enlightened in some final way. The resolution is that he learns to dance with his own contradictions. He's still the Steppenwolf, but now he knows that's just one dance step in a much larger choreography. Tomorrow he might be the lover, the student, the teacher, the fool. And that's not a failure of consistency. That's the richness of being human. As we close this extraordinary journey through the labyrinth of Harry's soul, consider what this means for your own life. What if you stopped trying to be one thing and started playing with being many things? What if you treated your contradictions not as problems to solve, but as instruments in an orchestra you're learning to conduct? What if the goal isn't to find yourself, but to create yourself, again and again, with the playfulness of an artist and the wisdom of someone who knows that the canvas is always changing? Harry walks back into the world not as a transformed man, but as a man who's finally learned how to transform. And perhaps that's the most profound resolution of all, not the end of becoming, but the beginning of endless becoming. The Magic Theater will always be there, Pablo reminds us, and Harry will return, again and again, to play new variations on the eternal theme of being human. Hermann Hesse's Steppenwolf is a profound exploration of the duality of human nature, a journey through the psyche of Harry Haller, who grapples with the conflicting sides of his personality, the man and the wolf. As Harry confronts his inner turmoil, he embarks on a transformative journey that ultimately offers a glimmer of redemption and self-acceptance. Here are some key takeaways from this powerful narrative. 1. Embrace your duality. Recognize and accept the various facets within yourself. Just as Harry learns to acknowledge his contrasting identities, we too must understand that our complexities make us whole. Begin by reflecting on your conflicting desires and emotions, and approach them with compassion and curiosity. 2. Seek meaning through art and culture. The novel emphasizes the transformative power of art and music in understanding oneself. To apply this, immerse yourself in forms of art that resonate with you, be it painting, literature, or music, and allow them to inspire and guide you in your personal growth. 3. Pursue authentic connections. Harry's interactions with others are crucial to his development. Building genuine relationships can offer fresh perspectives and support on your journey. Start incredibly small by reaching out to one person you admire and explore a shared interest or conversation. 4. Accept change as part of the journey. Embrace the inevitability of change in personal growth. Like Harry, who undergoes significant transformations, realize that change is not something to fear but to welcome. Be patient with yourself and view each change as an opportunity to learn and evolve. 5. Find joy in the simple moments. Amidst the existential struggles, Harry discovers moments of joy and freedom. Practice finding joy in simple, everyday experiences. Take a short walk, savor a meal, or simply breathe deeply, appreciating the present moment. Start small by dedicating just 5 minutes a day to mindful appreciation. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment below with at least one idea from this book that stuck with you, one concept you're going to carry forward. It could be something that challenged your thinking, something you want to try, or even something you disagreed with. Your insight might be exactly what another listener needs to hear today. And if this summary gave you something valuable, a new perspective, a spark of motivation, or even just a peaceful hour with your coffee, share it with someone who might need it too. Subscribe to One Book, One Coffee, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a new summary. Every week, we sit down together with one great book, one warm cup of coffee, and the simple belief that wisdom, shared well, can change lives. Until next time, keep reading, keep growing, and remember, every small step counts. See you at the next book.